Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, playing the farm supply stage at the Iowa State Fair, or else a scrappy upstart, playing the Toyota tent at Lollapalooza, this is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the third Friday of September 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Victor who drove a Volkswagen Passat with an MF Doom bumper sticker on it, and who was always trying to sell you rainbow-colored pills of unknown provenance. And old Victor would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now. You guys, that's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm over on my YouTube channel for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a little community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. Head on over to YouTube. Actually, no, head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. That's how you do that. Finally, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name. Then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show over there at Patreon. If you're not in a place to support the show in that way, I totally understand. You could still help us out, though, in a couple ways that are entirely free. First, you could leave us a review in the iTunes store. Or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. This week hails from Iowa, and after spending a decade in Nashville, she was just about ready to pack it all in and head back there before her debut album caught a spark. Hailey Whitters struck a popular chord with her sophomore album, The Dream, which brought her to national attention just 2 years ago. In her time as a writer in Nashville, she has written with and for Little Big Town, Alan Jackson, and Lori McKenna. She's recorded for Carnival and Big Loud Records. Rolling Stone has called her a buzzworthy performer. Saving Country Music said of her breakthrough album, "The Dream made the case for Hailey Whitters as one of mainstream country music's greatest songwriters who'd been unceremoniously overlooked and served a raw deal due to the situations and circumstances she faced when she showed up in Nashville." I got a chance to catch up with Hailey on the phone a few weeks ago to hear about her journey so far. Hailey Whitters, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. You grew up in Iowa, and I want to preface this question by saying that I have an immense amount of respect for Iowa. I've played the Mill in Iowa City probably a dozen times before it closed. Love it. Mm-hmm. All that being said, you don't exactly think of Iowa as being a musical mecca when you think of different country music meccas. That's where you're from. Now this is what you do for a living. What did music look like growing up around you?
Well, there wasn't much around me for that. Growing up a kid, like no one in my family played music. I guess my great grandpa kind of used to mess around with an accordion and thought he could sing. But, that's kind of all that I grew up on. He used to listen to a lot of polka. So I grew up hearing a lot of polka, and I was really early on. And then I kind of was just a kid of the radio, in the 90s country radio, Alan Jackson, Tim McGraw, Trisha Yearwood, the Chicks. I come from a very blue collar family. Everyone kind of worked out in the fields or were raising babies. So I didn't really have too many examples to look at for music or how to get into it. And, I moved down to Nashville when I was like 17. So I kind of missed out on all the cool scene in Iowa City, the Mill. I love the Mill. I played the Mill. It was so fun. And there's a little bit of a scene over there in Davenport, Rock Island, with the Dave Trotter sessions, things like that. But, I was too young to really know how to get into that. That was all a little bit older than me at that time. So, I listened to country radio a lot, and I wrote, and I picked up a guitar when I was, I think, 15 or so, and started writing. And then I hightailed it down to Nashville, and that was kind of my music education, I guess.
Were there any shows coming through Iowa that you went to go see? Were there bands that came through from country radio that you got to see, or you just lived it through the FM dial?
No, my parents would take me to, the Jones County Fair, or, the speed track in Cedar Rapids. They would always have like a county fair, the Johnson County Fair. And I would go to those things. I remember one of the bigger concerts that came through. We had to go to I think we had to go to Omaha to see it, but my mom drove me there. It was a school night, and she drove me, I think, Omaha is probably 4 hours from where I'm from, 4 or 5 hours from where I'm from. She drove me there on a school night to go see the Chicks. And that was the biggest kind of concert I'd seen, I remember seeing Leanne Rimes when she came through. She had to have been young. It was when Blue was out. And Ty Herndon, I remember seeing him. But yeah.
It's a good reminder for all the parents out there, because, just the idea of driving 4 hours back and forth, or whatever on a school night. As a parent myself, I can tell you that I would rather take a long walk off a short pier than do something like that. That being said, now look what you do for a living, and it's still something that was obviously very formative for you.
Yeah, I can remember that concert. That was the home record, and I can remember what the stage looked like. And we were in the nosebleeds, but I can remember just totally geeking out because I was such a Chicks fan, and they were such an inspiration for me and for me musically. And I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. So I was trying to be like them and write like them. And that was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. It just really inspired me to keep wanting to pursue this,
there's not many people that I know of who, moved to Nashville at age 17 out of nowhere to do it. And I would imagine any other people that do have been, plucking away at the guitar for years. Seems like a very short period of time between 15 and 17 when you start writing to, I just got to get down to Nashville. What was it that lit such a fire under you to go after just such a short time of writing?
Well, it was like, that's kind of when I started like playing. I always was writing. I wrote a lot. I've kept a diary since I was like 6 years old. I have a
Mm,
diary, and writing was always a big strength of mine in school. Like my teachers always really identified that and tried to foster that. So I think I came kind of from like the songwriter angle more than anything.
wow.
But I just like, I was just really passionate about country music, and my mom, she brought me down to Nashville when I was like 16, I think, as a way to kind of just like plant the seed.
Mhm.
And I went home from that trip like, I don't care, I'm moving to Nashville as soon as I graduate high school. I'm just moving down there. I'll figure it out. And it's like laughable at this point because that's
Yeah.
9 hours away from home for me. I'm the oldest of six. I know nobody in Nashville. I have no contacts. I don't even have contacts on the way to Nashville. So
Right.
it was a big move for me to do. And so I think just like that trip, like playing guitar, I'd been writing songs for a while now, coming down, seeing it in real time, seeing people just on the street with their guitar playing. And I was playing like 3-hour cover gigs at bars back home in that time too. So I think I was just kind of young and dumb. I didn't know any
Yeah.
better. And so I just went for it. And, it's good that they have dreams when you're young, probably. Cause once, now that I'm older, I don't know if I would have done that in my life now,
I know. Or else you'd have to lower your your expectations of living standards like
Absolutely.
significantly. That's okay. This is a part of an artist's arc, though, that I'm always so interested in because everyone kind of does it differently. Talk about on a really granular level, on just like a very day-to-day level. You're 17 years old. You arrive in town. You don't know a person in the music industry, much less a person in town. So what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? How do you get your foot? How do you even find a place to live, much less a place to play? And then all of that, how does it all come together?
Well, so when I came home from that Nashville trip and I was like, I'm moving there no matter what, I'm going to, figure it out. My mom kind of went into panic mode. And so she went and looked and she found MTSU and she found Belmont. And she was like, all right,
Yeah.
this little blonde, naive daughter of ours who literally could fall for anything. Like, we're going to get her some sort of safety net. So I was like, all right, I'll enroll. And, if I don't get in, I'm still going. But I did get in. And so I did have that. I moved down here. Parents drove me down, dropped me off, literally turned around and went back home. And I didn't have a car, but I was Belmont's at the end of Music Row. And so I just like, the minute they left, went walking and walked down Music Row, walked down to Broadway, saw the honky tonks. It's daytime. I can get in. I'm not old enough to be there at night, but I could get in during the day. And so I just go in and I wait till the band goes on a smoke break. And then I follow him out and I ask the bass player if I can like play in the band, if I can get a gig. I just didn't know what I was doing. And he says, well, come back on Sunday for an audition and we'll go from there. So I did. And I guess it worked because he said, all right, come on, here are your shifts this week. Come on down and sing. And those shifts are like 4-hour cover gigs. You're playing with the band. Sometimes you're playing just solo acoustic.
Mhm.
It's totally fly by the seat of your pants. Like, there's no set list. It's totally just like, what do you know? All right, sing those, and then we'll feel out what the crowd wants to do. And, Sweet Home Alabama, like all the Redneck Woman and all those things. And of course, yeah. So it's just totally like throwing things at you. But I just started doing those. I mean, I would wake up, I would do my classes first thing in the morning, 8 to noon or whatever. And then I'd get calls and I'd go play Broadway. I'd go play the airport. They had me out at the airport, Tootsie's in the airport. And then I was just like trying to hustle, I'd go, I made a few friends my first weekend who are still some of my closest friends to this day, who also were just big fans of country music and songwriting. And we would go out literally Monday through Friday. We would go out right at like 5 p.m., 6 p.m. when the first writers' night was usually starting for the night. And we would go to writers' rounds till like 10, 11 p.m. midnight. It would be like, we'd go to like 3 shows a night. It was just, every single night, like clockwork, do your class and then go out and like find shows to go to and just kind of like throw yourself into it. And that was like really, I think, really impactful for me so early on, because I had access to so many great songwriters in town, and I'm sitting and I'm listening to them and studying them from like 5 p.m. till like midnight every night of the week, and then I'm brushing up and and then that kind of leads into like, oh, I need to book a writer's round. Nashville's a writer town. Like, and then I would book a writer's night, and same thing as Broadway. I just walked up to the guy working the sound and I just said, hey, who do I got to talk to get a gig here? And then he says, oh, email Randy. And I email Randy, and Randy says, cool, you got a gig next Tuesday, the 13th. Come on down, 3 songs, writer's round. And then you go down, and then again, you kind of like immerse yourself in that community. And I'd go up and talk to the other writers and, okay, hey, I'd love to co-write sometime. Like, so I really just kind of try to throw myself into all of it as quickly as possible.
You're getting to watch all of those very seasoned and talented songwriters as a novice. What would you say are some of the things very early on that, what are some of the lessons about songwriting that you're learning very early on? And what are some of what are the things that you had to kind of disabuse yourself of to get better as a writer early on?
I think early on I was starting to see like a structure, you know what I mean? I'm going to a lot of like the row songwriters. So I'm kind of seeing the way that they craft the first verse and then get into the chorus and like how they hook a song and, the detail and like all of that. I'm starting to see like a similar structure everywhere kind of. I think like, for me, it was always trying to like really capture like a feeling, I remember having an early meeting with a publisher and I played him a song and he said, and it was like this heartfelt, broken hearted song. I think it was called Go Away Sun. It was like very like emo country and it was like, I'm depressed, and I remember going into like a plugger meeting or like a publishing meeting, and it's intimidating because you're new. Yeah. Nobody knows who you are. You want a publishing deal. That's the goal, and I sit down and I play this song for these publishers. And the guy just like straight up when I'm done, he's like, that's cool. He's like, so rule number 1, nobody can like, it's not for you. You don't need to write about you. You need to figure out what that boy sitting in that chair, drinking a beer on a Friday night, clocked out of his job, what he wants to talk about, what he wants to hear. And that was like weird for me. You know what I mean? Because I'm thinking like, oh, like I'm supposed to write like how I'm feeling and try and tap into like, just express myself, I guess. Right. And he's basically telling me like this isn't about you. This is about them. And you need to write songs for them. That's what a songwriter does. That's a songwriter's job. And I was so weirded out and turned off by that. I was so confused by that. And I was just kind of like, well, screw you, like,
yeah.
But as I've been a songwriter in town, I guess I kind of see his point a little bit, and I think also like there's a balance there. Like someone I grew up really loving and still love to this day is Leanne Womack. And I remember her saying like, I feel like if it's something I'm feeling, someone else is probably feeling it too. So I try and write what I know and, hopefully it transcends and it's like a universal thing. But I think there's a balance, but I just remember that was the first thing. And that really messed with my head. Yes. Because I didn't know how to like start thinking about like, what is it ever, it almost made me try and be like a mind reader in a way. It was like, what does everyone else feel? And how do I talk that language or something,
It is a serious balance because I do agree that you do need to be, it shouldn't just be an emo country, 10th grader's diary. But at the same time, it's like, but I think we've all heard songs and heard writers where you can hear them thinking a little bit too much about what the audience might be thinking. And it kind of becomes pandering very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I can't even remember how that song goes. I remember the chords. I remember actually liking it, but I'm sure like today, if I heard a song called Go Away Son, I'd probably be like, you go away. I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know. But, you see certain people like Taylor Swift. I mean, she was writing a sophomore girl's diary, and
Yes.
it's just there is a fine line, I think, between like it can't be like just a complete vanity project. Everyone
Yes.
can tell, when it's that, and then they're turned off.
But it also can't be like, the meme of Steve Buscemi with like the skateboard over his shoulder and he's like, hello, fellow kids, like that meme. It also can't be that, like, audiences are smart, man.
They're
Audiences,
so smart.
they're really smart, and they can tell when they feel like someone is kind of like carpet bagging into their scene and saying, hello, fellow kids. Like, so it does have to come from a genuine place. And that's not manipulative. That's just, that's trying to connect with other people. It's the same thing that you would do in a conversation, basically.
Totally. Absolutely.
You've, it sounds so far, it's interesting. Like, it sounds really cool that you were able to come into Nashville, both on the musician side and say, hey, everyone here on Broadway, let me break in and do a Tuesday night gig. Hey, everybody over here at the Songwriters Nights on the other side of town, let me get, the Wednesday night gig. What are some, I know it couldn't have been that easy the whole time though. So what are some reversals or setbacks or, what are some of the things you had to deal with early on dealing with rejection, frankly?
Yeah. I mean, those early years, like, I think I was on year 6 of being here when I got my first publishing deal.
Wow.
So up until then, I was waiting tables. I'd been a nanny. I was a receptionist at a hair salon. There was like a period I was like getting on Craigslist, like, who needs work today? It was just like whatever I had to do to have the flexibility to be able to just like dash and go play a Broadway gig or something. So those first few years were like very just like going with it. I don't think I was questioning anything. I don't think I was thinking like, why hasn't it happened yet? I was totally just like, I'm doing it, and I got my pub deal on year 6. And then it was like, I don't think I got my first cut for several years after that, and so Martina McBride was the first person who ever cut a song of mine. And that was probably year 8 maybe of being in town. But even still, in hindsight, I don't remember thinking that was weird. I was like, this is awesome. I got my first cut, like I made it. And then year 10, it started to kind of really like hit me. And I think that's just because for the first time, I was starting to see my friends back home in small town Iowa who are like, they're married, they're buying houses, they're buying a boat, they got baby 3 on the way. And I'm starting to be like, I got like a few cuts, but like, I'm still waiting tables. Like I don't know if this is working, and I'd kind of been like, I'd had a little first round of meetings with labels and no one was biting, and it was like, some of it was really stupid reasons. Like we have too many girls or, girls are expensive or something like that. But honestly, no one just wanted to sign me. And so that was just, I was starting to have a lot of questions and just like a lot of doubts. And for the first time, just like seriously, like, you know what, maybe you should just consider a different career path. And then that's kind of when, I was talking to my producer, my boyfriend at the time. We weren't producers. And I was like, you know what? Like, I've been here 10 years. I don't have a record label. Like, I want to make one record that's just put everything I have into it. If this is the last record I make and I end up moving home after this, like, I just want something that kind of shows my time here and that I can be proud of and my kids someday, And that led to him and I producing a record called The Dream. And that record, I paid for it all on waitressing tips. And
no shit.
Just like, yeah. I had like I had that, Martina cut was trickling in a little bit. Songwriters don't make shit these days. So
that was streaming. Yeah, it seems like
it maybe paid for a song or two, but I paid for it with my waitressing tips. And him and I produced it together. We had never produced a project. We didn't know anything about production other than what we knew, what we liked. And we also had, a band leader, Chris Donegan, who plays guitar. He's played guitar on all my records, and he speaks musician, which I don't. So he could communicate for me. But yeah, I mean, we just made that record and we didn't think about Music Row at all. We didn't think about country radio. We didn't think about a record deal. It was, this is my last hurrah, and let's just like have fun and make something we love. And, we'll just see what happens. And so I remember the day we like put out the first song. We started it on 10 Year Town. We put out 10 Year Town. Mm-hmm. And then like we went out kayaking and got off the grid. And when I came back, my phone had like blown up, and all these other artists and country music had started posting about it and all this stuff. And that started creating buzz around me to where then all those people who passed on me in those earlier meetings, they were interested again. They wanted to meet, and kind of little by little domino effect that just got a bunch of meetings on my calendar. And then, I lined up with management, but I still wasn't getting a deal. I lined up with a publicist, Missing Piece out of New York, contacted me. They wanted to do press for my record. Mm-hmm. And I went out, and Maren Morris had called. She wanted me to go on her Girl of the World tour, and Jordan Davis and Brent Cobb. So all of a sudden I have all this like tour work, which is great. Yeah. And so, but I still didn't have a deal until about a year after I dropped that record, probably like 6 months to a year before a label, and I had meetings, people were wanting to do meetings and I was going into them. But at that point I'd been around the block a little bit, and I was like, look, I am not just going to hand this over to someone who's going to put it on a shelf and do nothing with it. Like a lot of the girls I've seen it happened to in this town.
Yeah. Or, I mean, even worse, it's like you were the one that was able to make the momentum start happening. And I've seen this happen to a lot of people where they get the momentum start to happen. Actually, let me take that back. I haven't seen it happen to a lot of people because it's actually rare to be able to get any sort of momentum going in this business. So the few people that I know who've been able to get that momentum start going, when they go with the label after that, after they've gotten the momentum started, a lot of times all that happens is the freaking label just siphons off what they've done. Added nothing else to it. So how did you prevent that from happening? How did you prevent getting shelved? And how did you prevent, a label from just siphoning off what you yourself had begun?
Well, I like, even in the early times, even, Jake at that time when it was just Jake and I, or my publisher, Emily Furman, like I always had a really good creative team around me, and we were always like creating things. And then when I aligned with my management and my creative director, like I built a really good circle of people around me. And so when we got to the point where we kind of quit taking label meetings, we were like, y'all, this is like not what we want. This is deflating. Like, we don't even, this is more like, it was crazy. So then when I got with, when like Big Loud and Songs and Daughters approached me, their deal and their mentality was so different than what I'd seen in a lot of those other just very stale, old school Nashville label meetings, so it was very refreshing to me. It was about like, it was obviously like we're a business and like we are in it to win it, but it was very about like the artist and like the music and allowing the artist to be themselves and like finding new innovative ways to make that like work in a business that was moving towards streaming and, and like all these other different ways to put out music. It felt like the team that we'd been creating over the last year. You know what I mean? It felt on the same wavelength and the same approach to how we'd been approaching things. So it seemed like a really natural fit, and I really love the minds over there. Like, I talk to the label very frequently, and like, it's all about just finding the right opportunity and like blowing it up and stuff. And you know, this single that we have out now, like that's the first shot at country radio I've ever had, you know, and there's been times where I've been frustrated because I've wanted a different song or I wanted to go a while ago, you know, but like this song is reactive in a way that some of those other ones weren't or something, you know. It's just been it's really been a process of like learning to trust and you know, having people, you know, around you who you know, can help you bring out the best kind of plan.
It's interesting. The kind of label that you're describing there is a label that sounds like a modern creative company. And the only thing I can kind of compare it to is when I've heard comedians talk about getting deals with Netflix. And basically Netflix calls them up and they're like, here's some cash, make your special and send it to us. And then they're like waiting for notes or something, like once they've sent the special in, and Netflix is like, no, that's your job. Give us the special and we'll put it out. And so what you're describing there sounds kind of like a music equivalent of that, but I just haven't really heard of too many labels that are acting in that kind of modern way now that streaming is king.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's like my worst fear, why I kind of was turned off by a lot of those label meetings, early ones, was just like them signing me and then trying to just like make me something that I didn't want to be. Like that was just the absolute worst scenario.
And then when that doesn't work because it's inauthentic, then them blaming you for not being the different thing. You know what I mean?
That
like
was
totally
like
gaslighting.
That was just like, I was like losing sleep over that. I just like did not want that at all. And so that's why it was so refreshing to me to find this label that wanted, you know, I had started my own label when I was independent. I put the dream out on my label Pegasus, you know, and they were like, we want to be like a partner with Pegasus. Like, we want you to still be doing your thing. We just want to help like take it to a bigger level. And so, you know, and I think that's why, you know, when I was looking around at them and looking at the deal and I was looking at the other artists that they had, I mean, like Hardy, you know, he's like a great example of someone who's been allowed to be himself, and look how much it's like moving for him. You know what I mean? And so I've felt like at that label, I've been allowed to be myself, you know, and I've been allowed to make these records that I like and that I love. And I think that that's like really a very smart thing, you know, as like it's a very like, honestly, probably scary thing as a label, because you're putting all this money into it and trusting the artist. But also when an artist is allowed to just really like be who they are, I think that that's when it works. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, in art, most things don't work in general, right? So it might as well, but I know when it definitely doesn't work is when it comes through the filter of someone, I don't know, who's been in the business for like 35 years and they're like, do it this way. And you're like, cool, that's how it worked in 1988. And I'm glad that it worked in 1988 and good for you. And you got to buy your hot rods with it. And that's great. But we're 40 years later, man, you know, and a lot of businesses have changed with, you know, the web and then web 2.0. Nothing's changed more than music. I mean, it's insane how much it's changed just even in like the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and country music's still one of the last like genres that is so reliant on radio, you know, and you're starting to see like that change even. So there's just so many ways to get access to an artist these days, you know, and I think that you're right. Back to what you said earlier, fans are smart. They can tell when you're being inauthentic. And so, I mean, I luckily found people who like, you know, allowed me to be who I was. And I'm just not good at selling shit I don't believe in.
Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. Hailey had to make the decision that if Nashville and the music business wasn't going to serve her life the way that she needed it to, she was going to move on. That takes an immense amount of self-possession, because all of us can hit a crisis of confidence when it comes to what we need from life and whether we feel worthy of it. And there's a tongue-in-cheek poem by Dan Albergati that touches on that sense of worth, or lack thereof. It's entitled, "Among the Things He Does Not Deserve." Greek olives in oil, fine beer, the respect of colleagues, the rapt attention of an audience, pressed white shirts, just one last-second victory, sympathy, buttons made to resemble pearls, a pale daughter, living wages, a father with Italian blood, pity, the miraculous reversal of time, a benevolent God, good health, another dog, nothing cruel and unusual, spring, forgiveness, the benefit of the doubt, the next line, cold fingers against his chest, rich bass notes from walnut speakers, inebriation, more ink, a hanging curve, great art, steady rain on Sunday, the purr of a young cat, the crab cakes at their favorite little place, the dull pain in his head, the soft gift of her parted lips. So talk to me. We've talked a lot about the business end, which I love. I want to talk a little bit about the artistic end. How do you think, let me come at this from a different direction. These days, if you have a project that you're working on or a day to write, what does that day look like, and what does your process look like these days when you're writing?
Well, it's been a little like spotty for me right now because I'm touring a lot. And so I don't, when I'm not on a tour, I'm like lunchbox songwriter, Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, go in to the office, write a song.
Really?
That I find I have a lot more, like when I'm in that headspace and I'm in that mode, I'm usually also like reading a lot of books, getting out, hiking, being outside, hanging with friends, heading home to Iowa, filling up that well with all the back home drama. It's like, I'm really in like a creative zone. It's a lot harder right now where I'm at, because it's like I'm like one foot in both worlds, and they're two different. To me, I always say it's kind of like left brain, right brain, touring and writing. It's like, it's harder for me to do both at the same time. But anyways, so like yesterday I had to write, and it was a pretty chill weekend on the road. So I was like rested and I felt pretty good. And we went in and we actually had a really great day. We went over to a studio in East Nashville, and we all sat down, and we kind of were going on like a vibe, like trying to tap into, an older Tracy Lawrence type feeling and a song that he had and whatnot, and like trying to, follow that muse. Sometimes it's like sitting down and having a title in your phone. I'm constantly like writing down titles. I'm hearing titles everywhere, reading books, thinking of concepts, things like that. And I'm constantly writing it down. And then I'll take it into like a co-write, and we'll usually like throw some ideas out, or someone has some sort of music already set, and you walk into the room and they're like, hey, I kind of like laid down this vibe the other day. What do you think? And it's like, oh, I have a title that's kind of totally in that world. What about this? And it kind of goes from there. I've been trying to like write by myself a lot more. I used to do that all the time. And I've gotten so just like bad about it. It's so hard now for me to like sit down, or it's not hard. I'll sit down and I'll just like, spit something out. And it's more about just like the practice of doing it for me and like the exercise of doing it for me. But it's been a while since I wrote something by myself that I was like, I'm going to cut this. This is good,
What do you think you've improved at the most over the last, 10 or 15 years of writing songs?
I think something I'm working on trying to still improve is like really round out the concept and like, making sure everything makes sense. You know what I mean? I think like that's the thing about being like, sometimes when you're writing by yourself all the time, it's just like splattering your brain on the canvas. And that's something I think co-writing's always been good for me, to like really just like make sure everything makes sense together, and whatnot. And it's not so vague, but I think just like, it's hard. I think I am getting a lot better at just like the whole craft of it. I hope I'm kind of always getting better at it and honing it in and being able to deliver a line and like make someone feel something in 5 words. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. I think I know more about what I want to say maybe now more than I did at 17 writing Go Away Son.
Lord, we hope that's definitely the case. Was it different writing for this one, your most recent record? Because like you said, with that breakout record of yours, The Dream, you were kind of like, all right, well, here we go. I'm out of Nashville. I want kind of like a keepsake for me. This one's for me. I'm out. There's zero expectation. And now obviously you're writing the new record, Raised. And as much as you might try to keep it out of your head, you're a human being. At the end of the day, you got to know that there's different expectations than there were for the one before. How did you approach the writing process with those expectations in place?
Well, I think that's probably going to be a little more the next record, because I really lucked out with Raised because I'd written half of it before I even signed my record deal. So I kind of already had that concept. And that again was just kind of a like, I keep writing about home. So I obviously was very homesick at that time. So I was writing a lot about home, and I had half a record done when I kind of walked into that deal. So I think like that was a blessing, because I don't know if I could have probably easily been like, more malleable at that point. But I think this next record will be a little bit more of that pressure that you're probably talking about. And it's just natural, I think, to feel that, because you're not just doing it for yourself anymore. You have a band to pay for, you have people relying on you for their paycheck, and like, and you want to try and make something that, where money doesn't matter, but also money matters a little bit, but, so I think just like, whenever I get into that headspace, I try and remember that's a very fear-based headspace, and you can't create out of fear. And you need to remember what you're doing, why you're doing it. I always think like, if I died tomorrow, what do I want people to hear? You know what I mean? Like, what is my stamp? But I also just try and chase the music. Like, I think I've been here long enough. I kind of know when a song is halfway decent, or when it's good, or when it moves me at least. And I always just try and do what's best for the songs, I don't ever want to put out something that is just crap quality. Cause again, back to the fans, like you're saying, they can tell. I want to put out something that, you know, can still have some substance, you know, and can still feel good. And I try and be like, you know, a professional day maker. Like, I'm not trying to change the world with my music. I'm not trying to change anyone's life. I'm literally like 3 minutes trying to put a smile on their face, make them feel something outside of, you know, whatever their reality is that they're living in. Just make them feel like they got a buddy or something, you know?
Well, there is that side of it, but there is the side that you yourself just described, which is, you know, sort of this larger feeling of why am I doing this? If I died tomorrow, what would I want people to hear? The way I've always conceptualized it, it's like my job is over the course of my career, I'm trying to write Amazing Grace, a song that is so good that not only will people be singing it 200 years from now, but no one will even know who wrote it because it seems like it just came out of, you know, directly down from the heavens. So taking a look at art and music in like a more big picture way than that, I know you must think of it because you share a motto with one of my favorite American writers, which is "To the Stars on the Wings of a Pig," which is John Steinbeck's motto. With all this in mind, what do you must have a conception of what art and music is for, and particularly what American art and music is for. What do you conceptualize that purpose as?
I mean, you know, I just think like, yes, like when I think about like the classics and stuff, things like that, like Amazing Grace, a song that is just timeless. That is the goal. Like, write something that is timeless, that people 50 years, 100 years from now will still be feeling and still be thinking about and still be singing to themselves. That is the goal. And like, wake up every day with like that in mind, but also know that like, we write for a living. You know what I mean? We're going to write lots of things. And I like, and I think like, write everything, write the crappiest song you possibly can. Just keep writing. You know what I mean? Cause you're not going to like those timeless classic things. It's like, if you sit down every single day and stare at a wall and think about that, like, I stop. I just like shut down. It scares the crap out of me. You know what I mean? But if I show up every single day and write and do something, you know, and chase, like, have that in mind for sure. Try and be great always. But if I show up every day and sit down at the table and like, you know, just write, you know, I think that's what keeps me moving. That's what keeps me, you know, flowing. And like, you know, I'm lucky enough that I've been able to put out records. You know, if my label hit me tomorrow and they're like, hey, you're getting 2 songs, that would scare the crap out of me. You know what I mean? Cause that's why I like to put out a record and be able to have a song that's light, like Everything She Ain't, next to a song like Pretty Boy, that is very thought-provoking and talking about, you know, gender and stuff like that. And, you know, the expectations we put on gender. And like, I like to be able to put out a record like that and show all those sides and scopes and whatnot. But, you know, I think that I found in my creative process, if I start putting a lot of pressure on myself, I just shut down and I disappear for like 5 years, you know. And some of my favorite writers, like I've read a lot of books on writing, and I remember like some of them, you know, they're like, well, if it's crap, I don't do anything with it. And like, you know, I just sit there and every day just try and write something great. And I'm like, I'd like to read your crap. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, as someone who's a fan of your work, I would love to see what you wrote when you felt like it was just nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just love writing. And I don't think we all just are born, you know, writing greatness every single day, you know?
It's so true. I mean, as a fan, one of my, you know, maybe my favorite writer is Gillian Welch. And after she put out Soul Journey, when she put out Soul Journey, she didn't, you know, release anything for a while. I think I read in an interview at one point, she was just like, well, you know, nothing good has been coming out, so we just haven't released it. And as a fan, you're definitely just like, I'll listen to it.
Yeah, seriously, you're like, Dave,
I'll buy the record.
You're all around like the 10-year plan. Like, I want more, you know. But you know, another good thing, like on this kind of topic that I did, like this was like probably a few years ago, 5 or so years ago. It was before I'd made the dream. So I was spending a lot of time in the van, driving down the road, playing shows. And I decided I was going to listen to Dolly's discography, just like top to bottom.
Wow.
And there were like years she was putting out like 5 records a year. You know what I mean? Like putting out that much work, you can't, that's like a machine. That ain't just sitting down every day inspired for greatness. But I listened to it and it was like an incredible learning experience, because there's songs on there that I'm like, oh my God, like that is an incredible song. And then there's songs that I'm like, and it's just like a good reminder that like, one, Dolly was writing about everything and anything, and you can't negate what is and isn't worthy of a song, and I just think like for her, it was exactly what we're talking about. Like, I feel like even she would probably be like, yeah, not my best, but
And what's really interesting about audiences, I've found sometimes as a writer, I think you can feel like, well, if I put out one that isn't the greatest thing ever, everyone's going to leave me behind. But actually what ends up happening is they just don't end up buying that particular thing. But the moment that you come back with one that works, they're right back in the fold. It's not like they're like, I'm not listening anymore. I didn't like that last one. They're just waiting for the one that connects with them,
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true.
What's it been like for your family back home to watch all of your success and your journey, especially with how, integrally involved your mom was in getting you started here? How has that experience been?
It's been really good. I mean, my family's always been super supportive. I think like, they never doubted me early on, which I think is good, because I would have probably gone home in some of those darker moments. But they also just like, I think they're like super excited for me, and they just like, they're really proud of me because I did what I'm doing what I set out to do. And I know that they recognize that it's a lot of hard work, and, it ain't easy, but that I'm sticking with it and I'm doing it. And I think that they're probably also like, we're ready for you to make it big enough to move back home and be with us now. Like I think they're happy for me, but I think they also wish I was a little bit closer and that this job didn't take me away so much,
There's plenty of time for that. You got started so early. There's plenty of time for all that. Listen, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Very illuminating. And thanks for being on The Working Songwriter. I appreciate it.
I was so excited about this. Thanks for having me, Joe.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Hailey Whitters' latest album is entitled Raised, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.